Good evening. I'd like to call to order the Watertown City Council work session of Monday, November 20th, 2017. The first item on the agenda is discussion on the visit to Brookings City and County Government Building, and Bruce has a little presentation for us.
I do. Thank you, Mayor. I volunteered to kind of spearhead a little bit of research to see if this is something we'd like to do down the road in a co-op with the county. And so I was fortunate Brenda Hanton agreed to accompany myself, Glenn Villauer, and Mike Danforth to Brookings to kind of look at their facility. And this is something we're just kind of kicking the tires on, just to see if there may be mutual benefit for the county as well as the city of Watertown for a facility here. The timing's probably pretty good. I mean, we know that the county is in need of some facilities, and I think that we've put in the budget, I think, long term, and sort of our long term plan is to potentially build a new facility for the city. I mean, that's certainly not carved in stone at this point, but we went down, and I thought I'd just give a little brief presentation. And Brenda, if you feel like coming up to the mic, you certainly can. If you want to, and Glenn, if you want to chime in at any point too. And also Vince, you've got some experience with this facility and some of these issues down in Brookings. So anybody that has anything that they'd like to add to this, I would welcome that. So I thought I'd just kind of show you. These are high-end photographs, as you can tell. Okay. This is with a 1989 flip phone. You know. No, I'm kidding about that. It's a 91. Anyway. This is just one view, and I actually took this weekend because I never really got a picture, and the sun was back. Anyway, so that's gives you kind of an idea of what the facility looks like. This is the parking lot side of that facility, and what I thought I'd do is kind of talk about some of the features and some of the things that we learned in our tour. We had a guided tour down there in Brookings, and it was very enlightening. It was for all of us, I think. But beautiful facility, and they really, really do enjoy working out of this facility. It's a 3-story building. It's about 76,000 square feet. They finished it in June of 2012, and they've got 17 city and county departments housed in that building. It took a little over a year to build the place, and construction costs just under $12 million. So that's just a little bit of the particulars on that facility. Just kind of shows the lobby area, and it's one thing I noticed down there. There's a lot. It almost seems like a lot of wasted space in the hallways, but they're big. I mean, there's a lot of hallway space in this facility. But up front, they've got some really nice displays with some county and city memorabilia, some historical things. This kind of shows the stairwell. It's really, really a pretty facility inside, and according to them, it's very functional. This kind of just shows up in the next level, and there's Brenda and Mike and Glenn, as you can see.
Bad security there.
Yeah, Glenn got in. I couldn't believe it. Yeah. Anyway, this just kind of shows the second floor, and the way they kind of work this. My understanding is that the county's sort of on one side of the building, and then the city's on the other. Am I right? Did I say that right? And anyway, so the nice thing is they've really built this to accommodate growth in the future, it looks like, and it works out very well for the county and the city offices. This is just a photograph of the council chambers, and you can see, where the city attorney and the finance officer, all those folks sit on the right, and then the council's up on the left. They've got a lot of video throughout this whole facility. One thing I thought was kind of neat was they got a kiosk video in the front. Shows all the stuff going on. It shows all the meetings that are coming up. It's got agendas, and there's even one that faces out the window. So if you approach the building, you can see on a video screen what's going on with the city council agenda or whatever it is they're doing. But the chamber's really, really nice, very well lit, lots of room, and they also had a overflow area outside of this room that had a big screen television so that people could sit outside if they were full and still see what's going on in the council. this is just another view. That's of the back part. They got a little coffee bar and stuff in there, and no alcohol. We were kind of sad to see that in our visit, but just kidding. And this shows the front where the council people sit, the commissioners and the council people. And they've got a really, really nice setup for video, and for the computer systems, they got all the screens built in, and you can see here some of the lighting that they've put in to allow the video and so forth. Really good audio system. These are executive chambers. It's kind of cool because you can, if the council decides to go into executive session, instead of chasing everybody out and wait until everybody's gone and then opening that session, they just walk right next door, and there's executive chambers. And I also believe this can be used as a meeting facility for other things as well. And so that was kind of neat to see. There's sort of a community meeting room that people can use. And they've got a coffee thing set up in there, and dry erase. They got all kinds of graphic stuff in there that you can use. Just another view. There shows the elevators, and on each floor they've got video screens that shows. I mean, anywhere you go, you can see what's going on in the facility and the scheduling. And that's the state's attorney's office. Just kind of show you what some of the offices look like, and just a cafeteria that they can use throughout. And I don't think we have a lot of those recliners in our. Do we? We need. You guys need to get maybe get some recliners in there. I don't know. Yeah, we should get a table. But anyway, so it's really the whole place is laid out, I thought, very, very, very nicely. But just some of the areas that we identified that they sort of share resources, and obviously the utilities part they would share, and the way that the county and the city pay for these services is by square footage, and so the county pays a certain amount, and it's actually a little bit more than the city because they use a little more of the space in the facility. But shared areas, obviously, the commissioners use the same. They use the same room as the city council would. They can use the same meeting room, same cafeteria, the phone, the security systems. They can use all the same stuff. The phone, I know, is a little bit different number set up, I guess, if you wanted to contact somebody at the county versus the city. But you've also got maintenance and cleaning that they can share. The parking lot would be a shared part of the facility, elevators, and then the common areas, the reception, bathrooms, hallways, stairways, that kind of stuff. So there's a lot of things they can share that you wouldn't have to build two of if you have two facilities. It's sort of one-stop shopping in this place. Everything's under one roof. If you get confused, you go to the wrong building. In our case, if somebody finds out they need a building permit they think it's for the city, and they find out now you're in the county, then they got to go somewhere else. I mean, there's other things, and Vince, you might have some other examples of that too.
That's one of the things, I worked down there as they went through the process of creating that building. While they were building that, the offices remained in the courthouse, but once they moved over, they started the rebuild of the courthouse where I served as a circuit judge. But one of the things that was evident is that it created two areas of efficiency. One, the efficiency of the staff, able to go back and forth between the governmental entities, which happens quite a bit. In my previous days, both as a city attorney and as the state's attorney, there were many times when I was going back and forth between whichever facility I wasn't then housed at. That creates an efficiency, number one. Number two, there's an efficiency for the constituents. Those of us in city staff or that have been in county staff know that a lot of times you'll have somebody walk in your door and they're in the wrong building. And so you have to send them over blocks away. And so it's not a type of efficiency that could be statistically captured, but it would be saving the constituents that hassle. In addition, when I would, in the rebuild of the courthouse part, I used the council chambers, I use that meeting room, and I use the executive session room, all to hold hearings in. So those kinds of spaces have utility beyond just the meetings. Not suggesting Commissioners Gable or Hanton that they become your courtroom, but it just illustrates the utility that you can have.
Thanks, Vince. But yeah, it is. I thought it was really the convenience to the taxpayer, the convenience to the folks that work there, kind of shines on this whole facility, I think. Did you have something, Beth?
Well, I was just curious when we were talking about the taxpayer conveniences and then back up to the shared efficiencies. Were they able to share with you any numbers or any estimates as to what kind of money they're saving? I know this is only a 5-year-old facility, but do they have an idea from, utilities alone? Do they have any idea of what they're saving? Was anybody there to help you with that?
That's a good question, but it really, Brenda, I don't recall. Do you remember hearing anything in that regard? It's kind of hard.
We asked that question, and our tour guide, Stacy, whatever her name was, didn't have the numbers available. So, but we asked that question, but didn't get an answer. Just didn't have the information at the tip of her fingers.
Thank you. And just some of the other things, conveniences, features that I thought I'd point out were they really did have a state-of-the-art video. Their security systems were really modern in the whole facility. I mean, the council chambers, I think it's there's armor, I think, in the front, like we would have up in here. They've got an egress system where you can get out of there if you have to. They have safe areas. They have areas that they can lock down if necessary throughout the facility that you can go to. So from that standpoint, and that's something they share as well. You wouldn't have to have 2 sets of security systems, I don't think, like you would.
They also have back doors for offices. As an example, the state's attorney's office.
Mm-hmm.
If somebody's coming in the front door, the back door is available.
But that's just, like I say, it was a short presentation. We spent maybe a couple hours down there, I would guess, somewhere in there. And, it was a good first start for us. And if this is something that we feel that we want to pursue, then I think we need to put another group together perhaps and get a little more in depth and look at what direction we want to go. But it certainly, it seems to make sense to me that this is a direction that we pursue moving forward.
Bruce, first of all, thanks to you guys for going down there. Secondly, did they talk at all about future planning? For example, if the county needs to expand a bunch or if the city has a big expansion coming, when you're tied in the same building, how do they address that future expansion for maybe one but not the other?
Did you want to address that, Glenn, or?
I don't think we got into that.
Because I don't remember.
I think within the building itself, there was still room for some expansion, but we didn't ask that specific question, Don, so at least I don't recall having that conversation.
How landlocked is it?
It's landlocked.
It's pretty landlocked. But I don't recall. I don't recall us having a discussion in that regard.
I've been in the commission, the county side, and they have a lot of interior expansion available in every office, and I was in a couple of the city offices, and so they've got a lot of square footage built in to the plan as it is.
Bruce, do they house the jail in that facility?
No. It's 17. There are 17 different offices that are housed in there between the county and the city, but no.
Do you know if the structure was designed to be able to add floors?
Brenda, I don't know. For some reason, it seems to me that they may have said they could go up with that facility, but I don't. Do you remember that, Glenn? For some reason, I may have asked her that off to the side, but I can't say for sure on that.
Just a comment. I had occasion last week or the week before. I called down there and spoke with a couple of people. the city clerk and the assistant city manager down there for a different reason, and I kind of quizzed them too about how it's working, and they had nothing but great things to say. I mean, they really jumped on the efficiencies, both to the respective staffs as well as to the public, because again, I too, I mean, there's times I'm not quite sure where to go here in Watertown even, and that solves the problem. They're having both entities housed in the same building. But so these two particular individuals had nothing but good things to say about the arrangement.
Well, and I got to believe too, it's got to help with the relationship between the county and the city too, working together like that. I would think that would be beneficial. But any other questions? And I want to apologize to you folks for coming last time when I wasn't able to do this. So, but thanks for showing up. Thanks for coming tonight. I appreciate it.
Brendan Lee, would you like to add anything?
Thanks, Madam Mayor. But thanks, Bruce, for bringing this up and beginning this discussion as well. A couple things that came to mind as we're thinking about it. The number one thing, like you say, is efficiency, both in terms of cost and operations for the staff, operations or convenience for the public. And I think a couple of things just to keep in mind as we go forward in this discussion and with a city-county discussion about this. One thing is we got to keep in mind that each city and county is unique. Each set of facilities are unique. So one thing we're finding right now, I think most people are aware of what we're up to with the courthouse and our court facilities as part of the whole justice facilities problem that the county has right now. And we're, at least for the time being, for the years to come, we plan to make use of what the courthouse for that additional courtroom that we need for a new clerk of court space, and then as well as keeping the major county offices in the courthouse. So the Register of Deeds, the treasurer, auditor, and the director of equalization or the assessor. A few of the offices we do have to find other space around town and move out of the courthouse because we don't have the old remodeled jail to use as office space. But so where it makes sense to use existing facilities, we need to look at that, I think, and just keep that in mind as we go forward. And then one thing that we've had a few discussions with the Brookings. This got our attention a while ago when we started having issues with our jail and our court facilities. Is just how is this working for Brookings City and Brookings County? And it seemed to me one of the key things was having a good agreement in place on the use of that facility, on just kind of a standard operating procedure about who takes care of what. And I think that's something we always need to keep in mind and take the time to go through. If this ever comes to fruition, take the time to go through having a good MOU or lease or whatever the document is. And by the way, with the as most of you know, the city park and rec is working with the county on housing a couple of the smaller county offices that need to move out of the courthouse with those former park and rec offices in the front of the auditorium. So that could be kind of a good test case, I think, with that lease. And making sure we have good agreements in place and focus on the details. And the last thing I'd like to mention is that we need to kind of listen to each other's conversations. So as we talk about our justice facilities, we probably need to pay more attention to making sure that you guys know that we're having, say, an advisory committee meeting or something like that. And as if we form another committee, and maybe it's more appropriate to have just a city building committee, and then maybe one of us could be a liaison that just gets to listen in and make and comment from time to time. So I think it's important to keep the dialogue that Bruce has started.
I would agree with that. It's, we want to try to do what's best for our taxpayers and to make things as efficient as we can. So I'm glad that we're having these conversations and see if we can get something worked out.
Well, like I said before, too, I think timing is a big thing. I mean, it's how often does it happen where, both entities are looking perhaps to do something different? Yeah. Well,
just one more quick comment on that last thing about dialogue. One thing we've tossed around or discussed a little bit on the county side is with our Justice Advisory Committee is inviting a city liaison, so one of you to come and sit in on those meetings they're pretty exciting. You know, they can go for 3 hours, and so you might enjoy that. But anyway, just that would maybe be a starting point. And that's kind of as you know, that's a big deal for the county. That's a very labor and resource intensive thing for the county. So you're being aware of that will be helpful. That's something perhaps we should have thought of when we wrote the charter for that committee. But that's something that we're looking at. So.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
And thanks a lot, Bruce, for doing that. Appreciate it. All right, item number 2 is discussion, or 3, excuse me, 2017 Bridge Inspection Summary Report. Vanessa.
All right. Thank you all for your time. I'm Vanessa Victor, and I'm with Infrastructure Design Group. We were chosen to do your 2017 bridge inspections, so I'm here just to give you kind of an overview of what we found, and that way you're in the know for your bridges. I guess I'd like to call it the State of Your Bridges address. Just as a little bit of background, the state of South Dakota mandates you to do bridge inspections every 2 years, at least, on a structure. Unless it's a culvert, sometimes they can get away with 4 years. The general requirement for that is any structure that's over 20 feet in length. So there are some structures that are on your system that have not been inspected, but for the most part, the more critical ones are inspected every year. I included a pie chart, and generally engineers don't use pie charts, but it's pretty close to Thanksgiving, so that's about the only joke you're gonna get. It's gonna get pretty dry after this. Yep. Engineer, pretty dry. So we inspected 5 bridges in 2017. In 2015, when I did your inspection, there was actually 6. So you have gifted one of them with Glacial Lakes Energy and HESCO, which was a really good one to gift because it was not in very good condition. So and your numbers all increased significantly for the better. When we track sufficiency ratings, it's a new buzzword because about 4 years ago, as a bridge inspector, we all knew that our bridges weren't in great condition, but somebody had to say it in Washington, and then it created a lot of stir. And you hear sufficiency rating a lot. So when I go out and I inspect all your bridges, I input it and code it into a bridge management system that's set up through the Federal Highway Administration. And the idea behind that is the same bridge that I'm looking at in Watertown, South Dakota, is getting coded and rated the same as a bridge in New Jersey or a bridge in Texas. So we're on an equal playing field, and way more eloquent people who have been doing bridge inspections their entire lives, and committees of them have set up the algorithms that are built into that to magically produce these numbers. So as it stands, you have 1 structure that's in poor condition, 1 structure that's in fair condition, and 3 that are in pretty good condition. We're going to start with worst first. That way we can leave feeling pretty happy and warm and fuzzy. This is another kudos. I think we all know that 3rd Avenue Bridge is performing less than par with its age. You have already taken the steps to replace the structure, and until it does get replaced, it's still routinely inspected. We are currently working on the hydraulics to decide the type, size, and length that the replacement structure will be, and have surveyed the entire area. Your sufficiency rating on this actually did decrease from 2 years ago, and it is now at 35.6. So you're seeing that degradation, and it is what you would expect for an older bridge. Some of you have already seen these photos from 2 years ago, but we'll go through it. You have an asphalt overlay over your bridge deck, which isn't a terrible thing, except for you can't see what's happening to the actual concrete in the bridge deck. It is a lot of pitting and a lot of breakups in the asphalt, which traps water, and the cracking throughout the deck leaves these stalactites. On the deck itself, it's not a huge deal because it's a highly redundant structure. The deck of this type of structure is. But on the bent cap, it causes a lot of concern because that's a main load-carrying member. Some areas of the bent cap on that top left, you'll see a crack with exposed rebar. It doesn't look like much compared to the other photo, but that's actually much worse for your load carrying capacity. And on top of it, your columns you have exposed rebar on all four sides, which is severely hindering what that bridge can carry. So basically, we are recommending that it's posted at 16 tons for a single unit and 28 tons. The weight limit sign is right here that it's currently posted at. The state of South Dakota has changed the way that they post for load restrictions. Single unit and combinations is what they like to use now. Combinations basically means that there's another like pup trailer, or it's not one contained unit. And that was from the advent of special hauling vehicles, which Federal Highway makes us check for now. Please, Don.
Can you put that in perspective? 16 tons.
16 tons is pretty significant for a single axle. The reason when I say special hauling vehicles, those are like your super hoppers that became really popular with ethanol. And when we're hauling all these grains, you got a truck, and we're jam packing as much axles in there as possible. So you see 16 ton more often than you would think. On a city system, you see it much more significantly because it even comes down to your dump trucks. I saw Mike in here at some point, but so single axle is way more prevalent on the city front versus the combination. We had talked about this 2 years ago, but I'll bring it up. Another huge concern with this structure is the fact that there is a high-pressure gas main that is mounted to the railing. As it stands with the deteriorated condition of the bridge, when a semi does go over the bridge, it vibrates. It's supposed to. Bridges move, but when it's in deteriorated condition, it vibrates more than you would want. So basically, you have this bridge that's going up and down, and the utility, for all intensive purposes, is staying exactly there. So it's causing these large spall outs. We do intend on working with municipal utilities on the design to get that underneath the river, so safety concern is just taken care of. Possible or potential replacement costs for this structure, $1.4 million. So this would be box culvert that's located on North Lake Drive. It is in fair condition. It was built in 1931, and it has a lot of general deterioration and concrete degradation. It's typical for a box culvert. I'll show you this next picture, and you're going to get concerned because when you compare it to the 3rd Avenue Bridge and we saw those stalactites, that was disconcerting. Well, here there's stalactites and large spalls, but the nature of this type of structure is it's highly redundant. so it doesn't affect the load carrying capacity as much. Whereas on Third Avenue, you have the stalactites and then the bent caps, and then it's all being supported by 3 columns. One of the columns that's mostly deteriorated, where you have series of rebar cages and series of concrete. That doesn't say it's in fantastic shape. It's got a sufficiency rating of 62.5, and should be, on your radar for eventual replacement. It's pretty easy to think.
Vanessa, can
Yes,
I back
please.
you up for a minute? Where is that bridge on that we were just looking at on North Lake Drive?
It's by Compesca Lodge.
Oh, okay.
Yep. Yeah, it's not very long. It's also pretty easy to think that if the structure is just old, that it's in poor condition, and you have some amazing anomalies in the city of Watertown. So the Kemp Avenue Bridge is a good anomaly of it. It was built in 1935, and it's in exceptional condition. These are the original drainage structures that are still intact and no degradation around them. Generally, any source of water is a huge source of degradation and deterioration, and we're not seeing that. Probably not going to talk about the drain holes because you're not. Don might be excited and Sarah, but I don't know if anybody else would be too excited about it. Very much? Okay. There are some facade issues and some cracking that's happening near the wing walls. These are not highly structural elements, and the nature of an arch is it is extremely redundant, just like your box culvert. So in fantastic shape, and it's got a sufficiency rating of 92.3. This is about the only maintenance item, because you guys have been pretty forward-thinking on your maintenance, is there is a lot of erosion that's happening at the sidewalk entrances on both sides of the bridge. Already talked with Shane about installing a fence to stop pedestrians from just being able to fall off for the most part. I mean, that one right there is up to a 3-foot drop. So it's a safety concern. You can see on the other side of the bridge that there is a railing that is in place. It's not, I would say, substandard to today's requirements. 20th Avenue bypass, we are also working on, the city received a preservation grant on this, so we are currently working on epoxy deck sealing and installing bridge drains on this structure. This was installed in 2010 and has a sufficiency rating of 92.7. Basically, the majority of the issues came from the girders that were delivered to the site had excess camber. So to fix the camber, there was a lot of deck grinding that happened to the bridge, which you can see in this deterioration, to try to improve the ride across the bridge. It still does a little bit of this, but we're hoping that by installing the epoxy deck seal, at least we'll preserve the length of the deck component itself. No questions. And your best bridge in town is actually on 4th Avenue, according to sufficiency ratings, built in 1977, and it's performing fantastically. Really no huge major issues of note, a couple of hairline cracks with efflorescence. And that is it. Thank you for your time. Hope I didn't bore you.
That was great. Thank you,
I do have
Vanessa.
one other question.
Yeah.
We don't have any trucks that weigh 32,000 pounds in the city, do we? The 16-ton thing, we don't have fire trucks or dump trucks that even come close to that, do we? My question is, for
Generally, no.
emergency vehicles, you're lowering the weight limit. Does that present any issues with our emergency vehicles?
No, it will not. sorry, I should have said that for,
The other, the bottom of 10th Avenue, the culverts there, does that fit in? Does that fit in this along with the 14th Avenue Bridge?
that's a different inspection cycle,
Those are the opposite years.
so I can't really talk on that one, because I have not inspected those.
Any other questions? Thank you, Vanessa.
All right, thank you.
Item number 4 is discussion of North Lake Drive addition. And Shane, I think you were planning to lead this, right?
But before he gets started, I'd just like to note that because of the issues that are presented, I own similar property, and so I would declare my conflict as your attorney on this issue. If you want, my property's on South Lake Drive, though.
Thank you, Mayor. One of the challenges the staff, engineering staff, and actually building services staff has been presented with this summer was in June, we received a petition to rezone 2 lots on the, right here at this location, at that location along Pheasant Lane. And we did process that rezone through the Planning Commission and the City Council in June and July. So on July 17, 2017, those 2 lots were converted to RG district versus R1. Subsequently to that, the question has become, they get building permits for building residential garage units on that? And the answer has been no, because they don't have access to an improved street. When this subdivision was annexed into the city and subdivided in the 1980-81 timeframe, there was right-of-way platted, but no public improvements completed. And during that annexation, the action that was taken in 1980 was that the Plan Commission recommended and the City Council approved that no direct access to North Lake Drive by any of the lots in blocks 1 through 5 shall be granted. Access shall be only by the designated streets on said plat. So Pheasant Lane starts up here at 36th, or is that 38th Avenue? I can't read that, but and it extends all the way down over here to 449th Avenue. It has several tributary street accesses between Pheasant Lane and North Lake Drive. Here's one. There's another one right here, another right here, and another right here. So there are several accesses. All the right-of-way has been provided, but no improvements done. So the quandary that we're in is, how do we allow somebody to have a building permit with unimproved roads? And Pat Mahold has been reaching out through our department to seek answers, and we've been struggling to provide him those answers because of our requirements. Just for clarity, that even though we're along the lake and a lot of the lake has floodplain issues, this particular area has no 100-year floodplain concerns. But Ordinance 5.0302 is one that we kind of reference fairly frequently in the community. It states that curb and gutter is required in order to get a building permit. And obviously with no improvements, there is no curb and gutter here. And there is a process for the engineering department to be able to waive that. But waiving that in this particular case, I mean, because there's no traveled improvements of any kind for access makes that very difficult to address. There is another ordinance that we have, 240503, which talks about land suitability, and the Plan Commission can actually deny plats and certain things relative, based on that. I'll quote a passage out of that. The Plan Commission may refuse to approve what it considers scattered or premature subdivision of land by reason of lack of adequate water supply, sewage treatment, schools, proper drainage, good roads, or other public services which would necessitate an excessive expenditure of public funds for the supply of such services. And that's kind of exactly where we are right now. It's going to take a substantial investment in this location in order to bring things up to what we consider public standards. So, backing up, a question is, this area has been platted since the early 80s. No public improvements. However, I mean, there's been a few garages here and there built in that thing with the same challenges that we currently face.
Shane, how or why were those prior structures allowed to be built?
I can't speak to that. I don't have the knowledge or the background on that. I can just say that some appear, when we look at the history of the aerial photos, some changes were evident. Our photos go back to 2000, so there's been some activity since the early 80s out there, but I can't pinpoint how or why they got done. So
I can give a little bit of history. I've worked on this numerous times throughout my term working for the engineering department, and there are a couple of houses that have access via one of those feeder roads. And the road wasn't built per standards with curb and gutter and asphalt, but it's a gravel road. And so they get their access off of that gravel road and then onto North Lake Drive. So for the living quarters that are out there, they do follow that no access except via those particular roads. And can you show us where those roads are?
Sarah, in those instances, was that done within ordinance? That followed ordinance?
Not completely.
was that this one here, Mayor? I think it was this one. I think there's a house here and a house here.
Can you bring up the GIS?
I can if it's loaded.
How far does the sewer and water go up there, Shane, while you're looking?
The sewer goes on part of it, and there is no water behind at all. The water is in North Lake Drive, and it's on the house side of North Lake Drive, so they'd have to bore under the road to get water.
So at Pheasant Lane, those two houses have
They
bored?
probably bored under.
Okay.
And that is an issue here. There is a limit to the number of houses that can be served in this area by municipal utilities, and there might come a point where municipal utilities would say, no, we're any more houses, we need to build a water tower. And that's been stated in our comp plan for years. But these are existing platted lots, and so they have some rights that go along with them. We should be considering that before we're doing any more new platted lots. Absolutely, we should be considering these. The sewer goes on part of it, but not all of it. So some of these areas would be easier to fill out with housing than others. And about 10 years ago, I had some pressure from property owners out there wanting to be able to have building permits. And so I did a poll of the property owners to see if there was interest in doing an assessment project to complete sewer, water, storm sewer, and roadway improvements. And at that time, Mary Gephardt owned about half of the lots, and about half of the other people were interested. Mary was on the fence, and she ultimately decided she was not interested, so there was nowhere near half that were interested. And so we didn't take that through the assessment project at that time. But you could see certain pockets would be easier to develop with a stem road off of North Lake Drive and then reaching back behind the lots to serve some of the lots. And there are going to be some areas, I'm sure Shane was going to talk about this, some areas would be easier than others to develop, or we could just do an assessment project on the entire subdivision, bring the whole thing up to some standard. Right now, we don't have a standard for roads. We used to have a standard for roads for decades that was the minimum standard road had curb and gutter and 38 feet of asphalt and underground storm sewer. Most of the lake does not have that because it was built out before it was in the city limits. We annexed in county roads, basically. So, I mean, that's something that you could consider as council is an alternate minimum standard road for a situation like this. One size doesn't necessarily fit all. Most of the lake has maybe 20 feet of asphalt or 22 feet of asphalt surface and no curb and gutter and no storm sewer or ditches. And the water just has to make its way to the lake. In this situation, it doesn't all drain down toward the bowl. There's a road in between that's higher ground than some of this. So the drainage would be a consideration. But it is possible, and I don't know if you've looked at areas that would be easier to serve and or how you could group those together and maybe present an assessment project A, B, C, and D and let the individuals in those areas come together, and maybe you'll get a group of 6 or 8 property owners that would be willing to put in some sort of road, maybe not with curb and gutter and maybe not with underground storm sewer, but some surface. And we've even talked about gravel, and that's something we've never done to my knowledge is do gravel roads in a new development. Well, this one's really not new. We at the time this was platted, we did have the requirement for roads and assurances for the infrastructure. But for whatever reason, it just never happened. We don't have any assurance. The lots have been sold off to many different people, so now it's a big effort for any one individual to make a road. And who's going to do that stem part of it, which serves everybody? Should the first guy that builds a house out there or a building be shouldered with that, or should that cost be spread amongst all of the lots? And so those are big questions that the staff's been struggling with. In my opinion, you get economy of scale by having a larger project. So a larger project would cost less per lot to build. And if we could get some sort of consensus amongst the property owners in doing an assessment project, then I think we should assist them in that regard. Otherwise, allowing people to have access onto Lake Drive is it's a dangerous situation. I'm not sure we'd want to get rid of that requirement. So that was a big interruption, but do you want to add to that, Shane?
No, that was an excellent input there. Can you go back to the other drawing real quickly? I want to illustrate something, then we'll kind of use the GIS more thoroughly. On the drawing that you see, everything that is highlighted in magenta is now owned by someone else other than the Mary Gephardt property. So we've now gotten to where, at least on the
more than half
platted lots, we're more than half owned by others than the Gephardt family, which is now primarily.
Doc Howard.
Doc Howard, yes, correct. So, and I have met with Doc Howard, and he and I'm not trying to put words in Doc's mouth, but he doesn't intend to sell any of the property owned or controlled by him, nor does his family. And that's their right to hang on to the property for as long as they wish. However, our conversation went very well, and he's saying that people are out there kind of haphazardly using the roadway to access things and probably driving on some of his land and other people's land. And as you can see, I mean, you look right here, there's a camper that's parked right in the dead center of the right of way. There's, oops, I switch back to GIS, please. Okay, so I switched drawings, apologize. This is a camper that's parked in the middle of the right of way. There's trees in the middle of the right of way. You kind of come down the roadway, and then there's other obstructions in the east or western portion, south portion, however you want to orientate yourself. But so there are lots of conflicts that Doc Howard would like to address too, because if there's a gravel road or some improved road there, then he's going to utilize that to access certain parts of his farm without conflict as well. So he's not adamantly against it, but he doesn't intend to sell or further subdivide any of the land maintained by them. But with that said, I guess the question is, are we going to go to our standards where we have a granular base, an asphalt or concrete pavement, curb and gutter, sidewalks, along with the curb and gutter then becomes drainage concerns, storm sewer, and or ditches, detention ponds, all of those things. So what I would really like to be able to do is get some feedback from the council and ultimately the planning commission. We've talked extensively at the planning commission about this too. So one thought was from the planning commission is maybe we rezone that entire all those lots as RG so that we know and can control the density of residential living there, although the RG district now allows sewer and water connections, no living quarters. But so that's an arduous thing. And what I would caution us is that if we select something less than everything, that we do it in such a way that it's not going to be super expensive. In other words, if we choose to do a minimum maintenance gravel road, something that's low standard, just like a county gravel road, but without installing the water and the sewer utilities, those are the big heavy utilities, I call them, that require a substantial amount of disturbance, so that 10 years from now when we go through and do needs to extend the sanitary sewer and water, that we don't have to destroy an entire paved roadway system to do that. Because normally you install those bigger, larger utilities in advance of paving. But so right now I'm asking for some guidance to see if there's interest in adopting some type of gravel road access. And it could be in short segments, as the mayor had spoken. There's, as an example, right in the area that Mr. Mahold is most concerned with, there's a roadway access here, one here, and one here. They could petition and just do a little loop as a subset instead of do the whole thing, you know, or we could come in here and down and back out in little subsets. We don't have to do the whole thing all at once if we choose not to. Now, I believe Mr. Mahold's lots are right here. Is that correct, Pat? Yeah, yeah. So right here are the two lots that Mr. Mahold wishes to sell to others and has rezoned that to RG.
Shane, you wouldn't see a lot of usage. Or you wouldn't see a lot of usage with this road, would you?
Well,
I mean, there wouldn't be a lot of traffic on this thing. I wouldn't think hardly at all.
Not at this time. but
And I'm going to ask.
someday-
I'm just going to ask this: Is this even an application for a regrind surface, or would? I mean, to me, it seems like that would be the route to go, gravel, or if there's an opportunity for regrind. And the only reason I say that is the dust issue, and you're saying there's nowhere for the water to go. If you do have a runoff issue, it's not going to work out real well with gravel, probably.
Actually, right where this property is located is really close to the highest point there. So the water drains away to the west and away to the east. This happens to be the high spot. Regrind, whatever we choose, it could be crushed concrete. I mean, there's lots of options, but something less than pavement is the real question. And less than curb and gutter or our normal procedure.
Shane.
Yep.
Shane, do you anticipate this would be housing that would ever come about back here? Or do you think this is mostly garages and big sheds and that kind of stuff? It seems like years ago when we were talking about this on the Plan Commission, it was determined that this people wouldn't have thought this was going to be housing back there, but it would be a good place to have a big garage or big shed or something.
Well, the problem is it's mostly zoned for homes, and that's a down zone to go to the residential garage district, because you cannot live in that, so you can't sell that for a home. But if you assume it's going to be garages and don't extend full services to it, then someone wants to put a home there. That hasn't been facilitated with normal growth patterns to get the utilities out to them. And that makes it more expensive for them, which further decreases the value of their property. So that's got to come from the owners, that request. I think we have had a couple of rezones to garage district out there, and some of them to cover structures that got built without permits that are just garages, just to make them legal. But the rest of those property owners would have to buy into that, and that will degrade the value of it.
Shane, for the structures that are out there right now, are there any kind of city services provided as far as garbage or, fire protection or mail delivery? Is there anything that's being done out there now?
If they're occupied as residences, yes. There would be mail for sure, likely city garbage because they're within the city limits. Those few that are out there probably get some minimal level of utility service off of Lake Drive, because Pheasant Lane and the little stub streets in between are not improved. I can't imagine that they're not getting served in some fashion.
Or snow removal. I mean, even if we go with a minimum standard road, we still have to be cognizant of all the different
Right.
services that we're gonna have to provide out there.
Snow removal's a big one.
I mean, is that gonna cut it if we just go with a minimum standard road out there?
Right. That's exactly right. That's exactly all of the discussions we're having, and how it's hard to accommodate what seems like a very simple request to get a building permit has a very deep discussion as to how or if it should be done. We do have, our ordinances talk about private roads, and private roads have to be at least 28 feet wide, maintained in a passable condition. Greater width may be required when necessary. Private.
I don't think you can have a private road on a
No,
public right of way.
I'm just describing what we would consider our minimum acceptability right now is that, and they need to provide a height clearance of 14 feet, 6 inches. And, they need to, they're subject to the same grade requirements as public streets. So that's what I would consider a minimum roadway. Now granted, that's a private roadway, not a public roadway, but that's basically what we would allow somebody else that would never turn it over to the city. We wouldn't accept it like that, but that's what the minimum road is right now.
So I guess you're asking for a kind of a feel of problems that you might have with allowing a gravel road to be installed. What kinds of assurances would we want? Would we do it as a temporary, when there's a certain number of houses built or structures built, that they agree not to protest an assessment project to pave? We could do something like that. Oh, yeah.
We do that routinely, where there's not the full public improvements. Most common thing is sidewalk, actually, but if somebody's getting a building permit in an unimproved portion of the road, we get a waiver of right to protest document along with the building permit. And most recently, my best example is we just paved 12th Avenue Southeast, a couple blocks south of Highway 212, based on finally getting enough waiver of rights to protest, and we pushed forward with the project there to get that paved. That is one way to make sure that these properties, if they are to get building permits, we can get them to sign that document, and then that paves a way to do the ultimate improvement someday.
Would we have to do that per section if we decided to do that as like your loop that you had alluded to, perhaps?
Well, what I would propose is whatever we do would still be done, in my opinion, by petition from the adjacent landowners. So we would have to decide what would our minimum public improvements that we would require are. In other words, if that's just a gravel road that's maintainable and people can use the access and turn around and get back out, that's one thing. So I would say that that's our minimum. We decide that, then they would have to petition to at least get that type of service or not. Otherwise, right now, if they petition for public improvements, it would be grading and graveling, paving, curb and gutter, and even sidewalk at this point in time. And really, my opinion is that the council is the best place to ultimately grant or deny those. We would take it through the public process. We would bring it through planning commission procedures if need be, have all the public hearings, etc. But ultimately, any change from what level of standard service we expect should be approved through the council.
Well, really, what we have is we have buildable lots that aren't buildable because they don't have proper roadways.
That's exactly right.
So if we change it to residential garage, I mean, they still really can't build until they can get to the public facilities.
One of the requirements to get a building permit is to have improved public access.
So really can't do anything until we do something, one way or another.
Well, the property owners can petition, that's the normal process.
Right.
Shane, I'm not suggesting this is a solution, but I mean, there are structures out there that we're not quite sure how or why they were allowed. I mean, is there any, I caught the planning commission meeting, and Mr. Mold was very eloquent in his frustrations that he's been going through since last spring. Is there any provision for any kind of variance that can be granted to allow, let me ask this, is this the only structure that is being requested right now along here? In other words, is Mr. Holt's request the only one that we're aware of at this point?
For building permit,
Yeah.
yes. There is one other change that's, we haven't received an official request yet, but one of them somebody's been in our office and talking about is this is a public right-of-way access that splits the same property owner owns property on both sides. He's proposing that we vacate this right away and then rededicate it here, and then he would move and improve his fences and buildings and whatnot to accommodate that, and then he would have one contiguous piece of property that's not split by public right away. That has not been officially requested yet, but he's at least inquired as to what that procedure would be to do that.
Okay. I mean, I guess my ultimate question is for the sake of this one request that we do have before us, being can a variance, I'm asking totally out of ignorance, I mean, is that a possibility that a permit could be issued if there's a variance granted to allow this project, and then still work on the long-term solution like we've been talking about?
That would be at the discretion of the council to approve something that's outside of our ability to grant permits.
Well, what we're asking is to go outside the ordinance, and that's
Right, and that,
typically what happens, you know, at a Board of Adjustments hearing, so
That's
I
not
would,
something Board of Adjustment can consider, because it's public improvements. It's not house improvements.
no, I'm talking about Mr. Mahold. Is that the same thing?
Right.
Is that what you?
No, he's talking about a variance from the access requirement, which is in a separate part of the ordinance. It would have to go through a process, but not through the Board of Adjustment. They deal with building.
So in your opinion, Mr. Mahold's property would not qualify for a petition at the Board of Adjustments for variance? Is that what you're saying?
That's what I'm saying, yes.
so, and I just want to mention this because it's been discussed as part of the process. I'm not recommending it, it's just a simple fact. One way that hasn't been discussed is reducing the speed along Lake Drive and opening it up for access just like it is on the other 3/4 of the lake. I'm not saying that obviously they had some foresight back in the day when this was annexed to try to prevent that. But at that time, the speed limit and the use of the roadway was different than it is today. Now the city has control over the roadway. Back then, I'm assuming the county or the state probably still had
The speed limit in that part of the road has been discussed several times.
Yeah, I understand that too.
And it's always very controversial. There are people who really want it reduced and other people who adamantly think that's the wrong thing to do, so.
I agree. I just want to throw that out there as if we're going to talk variances, I mean, maybe it's one additional access on the North Lake Drive rather than monkey around with the rest of the stuff. That's just another thing for you to think about. I'm not suggesting it as the only alternative.
My name, excuse me. My name is Pat Mahold, and I've been involved in this since the 70s. And excuse me, there will be no houses built in this addition, in this North Lake Drive addition, simply because of the problems that are there. Most of the people don't even know that there's a R1G available. Everybody would sign that. You brought up the other day that maybe we ought to have a RG1, let's see, an R1G1. The traffic out here, folks, is really something. You'll probably, my neighbors, I would say between the Kempesca Lodge and the end there, you won't see 10 entries a month into that land back there. That's just wasteland. It's just storage place. I mean, all you got, I got people's docks, I got people's boat lifts, and I don't know who in the heck they belong to. They just drop them. You know, I said no name on them, or you know, and it's really frustrating. But here, I mean, as an example, these are built for garages, for storage. I want to build a garage so that I can keep my camper in that garage.
If that's the feeling of the property owners,
Absolutely.
Then they should petition to have it rezoned, because that totally changes the whole picture for what services need to be provided there. Well, a garage isn't going to be accessed several times a day like a house would be.
No. It's
So
Yes, if you see what's done there, if you go out and look at that thing, that's right, except for the 2 houses that are down there, and they were down before this came into the city. Okay, both of the lots were bought. So there's a very little area there that has sewer and water. When the city came to me and said, Mr. Mahold, could we use your driveway to run the sewer down towards your house about 100 feet and then cut across? We need your permission. I said, sure, no problem. So the city sewer comes down my driveway and goes about, I suppose, 800 or 1,000 feet and joins up with North Lake Drive. Folks, the use, and I understand this, and I'm, granted I'm frustrated, but the simplicity is that nobody is using that on a regular basis.
Well, they can't legally, you know, and we've had inquiries throughout.
Well, what are you talking
from
about?
here and
there's,
there.
There's all kinds of 8 entrances into there that people are using that was never, so they are using it. They're using it, they cut their own. They just cut their own, so they are being used. If you count them, they're not city. Those are just people that just did what they wanted to do. Well, what I'm saying is the land, when it was originally proposed, I was in on some of the hearings on that back in the 70s when that was originally proposed. It was a marvelous idea. And then you had to have the city, it wanted the roads, the houses all had to face that driveway, that new road. Okay? So that the sewer and water and all that stuff could be brought down there. Okay, now it's down there. But nobody's using it. I mean, it stopped. It stopped, but all it is garages. And also what I'm trying to say is that road 30 years from now won't be any different than it is
Well,
now.
and that's an important point, and I think that our staff can reach out to everyone who owns property there and ask who would oppose a rezone to a residential garage district, because that really changes the picture. And the access is a big deal here. It would take a council action to reverse anything that was designated back at the beginning, which is what's keeping you from building, or anyone else from building on there, is that access piece. So I think we need to wrap up here because we have a council meeting starting, but I think
it's more challenging to have a person pull into that from 139, the old 139, than pulling up and having back into the driveway on North Lake Drive that would be on the lakeside. There's a lot less hazard. But there's these lots are so close together.
What's the difference?
You know, they're 50-foot lots or 75-foot lots, and they're awful close together.
But they're very close together on both sides. They're approximately the same size lots on both sides.
No. The lots on the roads, Pheasant Lane, are 100-foot.
Is that true, Shane?
100-foot in width.
I'd have to look at it a little closer, but
They're all 100-foot lots.
You'd have to
The other
run
ones
the
are
flat
50
layer,
foot,
not the parcel.
75. That goes all the way up to the water tower. No, well, so here's all I'm saying is that
They look
it's the
same
only
size to
place
me.
on the lake that I know of where property is owned by the city on both sides that has a 40-mile-an-hour speed limit. And believe me, I don't want the speed reduced for myself because I got to get into work every day too. Okay? But no place on the lake is it that way. It's all 30 miles an hour or 25 miles an hour. And you've got wherever you want to grant us, but I don't think it's necessary to put the roads in myself. Let things develop. I have no problem going to, they were going to do this, go to the property owners and suggest that. And I have no problem going to people because that's what their intentions are too, down the road.
Well, if that's the case, then we should proceed with that and get it rezoned so that, as long as there's an R1 out there, that person could build a house on their property and they would need full services. And they're going to expect snow removal. They're
Well,
going to
just
expect
like-
garbage collection, just like anyone else.
Just like it's been proposed to me.
Okay,
You build the road, you build the road, you pay for the road, curb, gutter, and blacktop. So I go in 150 feet plus 20, so I got 170. Now I got to go across the backside of 200 feet and do the same damn thing. Now the guy on the other side doesn't want, Dr. Howard doesn't want anything to do with the road.
Well, and
we
annexing
say-
and
we say-
platting more lots would be stopped by our comp plan, whether Doc Howard wanted it or not, because our comp plan says no more lots will be created in this area. So if we're gonna follow our comp plan, we won't be platting lots on the other side of that road until we have an upgrade to our water system. But anyway, I think we can proceed with that, Shane, with sending out an inquiry at least to see who would oppose a rezone to RG district. And that will give us a starting point, because if it's true that the vast majority of folks just want storage garages, that doesn't generate the traffic that
Okay, so
single-family homes do.
just for clarity then, and this is a question that doesn't need to be completely answered right at the moment, but if we rezone it to RG, are you suggesting that we open up the access on the North Lake Drive rather than improve Pheasant Lane? That's kind of what I'm
Maybe.
hearing.
I wouldn't even go there with houses, but if it's
Right.
garages only, they can't be lived in, they won't generate the traffic. The hazard is drastically reduced. So I think the first question is it true that most of those folks just want it to be garage district?
Okay, we'll do the survey and figure that out, and we'll continue the discussion. I would want to point out again, though, that RG zoning does allow water and sewer service now, so we can't close the book on those two public utilities needing to be extended at some point if somebody wishes to have water and sewer to their RG property. So just keep that in mind. We'll continue the discussion. We'll keep Mr. Maholden close to us in these discussions and kind of nudge things forward. Thank you.
Okay, very good, thank you. Before we totally close this out, did anybody else want to say anything about this? Okay, moving on, future agenda items. Anybody have a future agenda item they'd like to discuss? All right, then we'll go ahead and adjourn, take a 10-minute break, and we'll be back for the council meeting at 7.